Alfie, are you excited to be at the farm today? Boo! I am! Are you very excited? Hang on, because I can't actually see you.
1 in 57 children in the UK is on the autism spectrum.
I like the part, definitely, the part where you get special symptoms.
And 78% of these children are diagnosed with at least one mental health condition.
It's just not nice to see him as a child struggling every day with his emotions.
But while autistic children are more likely to encounter mental health problems, autism itself is not a mental health condition.
Because it is not a mental health problem. It can cause distress, it can cause behavioral problems, but it's a neurodevelopmental condition. It's the way we see and experience the world in a different way.
As it stands, autistic people can be sectioned to a mental health hospital purely for being autistic.
I think what's very unhelpful is the way that the system responds. And it responds by breaking those attachments with your family. It responds by, taking you from your home and locking you in an institution.
I walked down a corridor and there were two other people in seclusion rooms and they were distressed and upset. And there was my little girl stood behind a perspex window.
The Mental Health Act is the law that, amongst other things, allows autistic people to be sectioned. That means that they could be held in a mental health hospital for an indefinite amount of time when they don't necessarily have a mental health condition. But the government's currently reviewing this act, and there's an independent campaign that wants to remove autism from the act altogether. If that was the case, it would no longer be possible to section someone for their autism diagnosis alone. As I follow Alfie, I want to find out if there's enough mental health support for autistic children, whether autism remains on the Mental Health Act or not.
Come on, tell us what your name is.
Alfie Arnold.
And how old are you?
I'm 111.
Are you now? You look very good for 111. Can you tell me, what is autism to you?
Really upsetting.
Can you tell me about that? Why do you think it's upsetting?
Because it's upsetting because I don't get to control myself when I'm in bad situations like what I said.
Okay.
Alfie has autism spectrum disorder, which affects how he sees and interacts with the world. I'm meeting Alfie and his family for the first time today.
Hi, nice to meet you. Thank you.
As we get talking, Michelle opens up about his mental health.
He does have moments where he feels like quite anxious. So things like if he's going into a big group of lots of people, often at school as well. The anxiety is something that kind of sticks with him, but it's sort of up and down. And in the past, he has said things like, I just want to die, and things like that.
Alfie can feel anxious talking to new people, so I asked Michelle to keep a video diary during the time I spent with the family.
This is my guinea pig, this fat boy over here. Hello, Max. Say hello. Oh, he's scared of me.
What do you normally do to calm down when you feel angry?
Well, to stop me from being angry, just say something rude to me.
Alfie, you're a poo-poo head.
That frustration, how does it manifest then?
Usually he'll get really angry. Sometimes he's sort of thrown things round. Sometimes he'll hit us. In the past, he's hit a lot more. He doesn't tend to do that quite as much now. And then I find that it's like a fine line between him getting really, really excited and then all of a sudden he's having a meltdown and he's shouting at me and being really quite rude to me. Like he'll just start kind of saying, "You're a bad mum."
The campaign to stop autistic people being sectioned under the Mental Health Act for their autism diagnosis is gaining momentum. But mental health lawyers point out there's also the Mental Capacity Act to contend with.
If someone needs treatment, there are two frameworks which can be used. There's the Mental Health Act, and then there's the Mental Capacity Act. And the Mental Capacity Act applies if you don't have capacity to make decisions about your care and treatment and the arrangements to be made for you.
Even if the Mental Health Act is changed, there's still another act that can be used to section autistic people. So, would it really make a difference?
I think it's all the services working together. It's about, first of all, recognition and early intervention, getting that right support from the beginning. The schools to adapt to an autistic young person, for us to offer enough interventions to avoid the person to develop a mental health problem or a mental health condition.
So who's this?
Ted.
Oh, does he usually have a hat on?
No.
No. Aha, there he is. So he's the one you always take to school, isn't he? And who do we always have in the car with us when we go?
Luna, Sky, the puppy. Max, my guinea pig. I will show you in his pen. Finn.
Do you ever worry about Alfie and his school environment?
Yeah, like I worry because I think the gap is showing a lot more now. So between him and his peers, so I think I think they're starting to notice that there's differences in him and that he struggles with certain things and things like that. And so I do worry that then other children might start to kind of bully him because of that, because of the differences. We're in half term at the moment, and after half term we'll have a bit of a struggle getting him back because he's going to be anxious about all those things, like seeing all of those people again and then having to kind of adapt to that again. So every time it's like the first time again.
So it's that kind of routine trigger then.
Yeah. Anything that when the routine changes, he kind of slips back into struggling with things.
Good, mate.
Alfie's environment has a big impact on his behaviour and feelings. Professor Amelia Roberts can explain more about what school is like for autistic students.
The experience of somebody with autism is something that we might not even be aware of, or I might not even be aware of, such as if you think about the noise in the corridors, I might be aware of that. You go into a school, the transition between break and back into lessons is clearly noisy. You can see why that might be a difficulty. But somebody with autism might be sitting near a classroom window and they might be distracted from the smells coming from the canteen, or they might be distracted by the hum of a projector. So there are certain elements of sensory awareness that would go below my radar but might be actually causing somebody with autism to be in quite acute discomfort.
A lot of these triggers are relatable for Alfie.
What about strong smells, like the smell of perfume or the smell of something?
Give me a take. Brings a strong smell here, and then they will see my reaction.
How would you normally react?
You'll see, because I can't explain it.
Okay. I can't really bring a strong smell here right now.
Why?
So I don't think I could really show you how you'd react.
Why?
Loud noises especially. Often I go and pick him up from school and he's having to wear his ear defenders because he finds like the playground quite noisy, so he struggles with that.
But Amelia has hope that the education system is making progress.
People are getting more and more savvy about the impact of transitions on young people and working really hard to make a difference. You won't see it everywhere, but you will see it in many, many places.
In the places where you don't see it, what might that look like on a tangible level?
What you wouldn't want to see are teachers who shout, teachers who feel very inflexible and won't change lessons to meet students' needs. I was once working with a young man in a maths lesson, and we were matching up coins with value. And I said to him, can you match up the coins with their value? and he didn't move, he didn't pick up the pencil, he didn't do anything. And it suddenly occurred to me that the word match was completely wrong because it doesn't contain an instruction. So when I said to him, could you please draw a line between the coin and the value, he picked up the pencil and he did it immediately. Now, you could believe that the problem was that the task was too difficult or that the boy was being non-compliant. And in actual fact, neither of those things were true.
I don't know.
Teachers misunderstanding autism is something Alfie has experienced too.
Do you think people with autism find it
Yeah.
hard? Why do you think that?
Because I could get the wrong answer. Say like a bad thing to say, and then they will come right at me and tackle me.
But mainstream school, with all its sensory triggers, isn't the only option. Like Alfie, Giles has special educational needs. He has Worcester-Drought syndrome, which affects his speech.
He needed to go to a school where they had their own speech and language therapy, so it could be delivered on a daily basis to him. And because they couldn't provide that, I contested the school that they wanted to send him to. And because they wouldn't agree, I was forced to take the local authority to tribunal, which was a very long process, quite a stressful process, quite an expensive process.
As Giles gets ready to head back to college, Jane tells me about how residential school has helped his mental health.
I think because of the schools and the college he is at now, they have dealt with it in a way to avoid more of a mental health issue so that he would move towards having to be sectioned. So they did everything to avoid that. And I don't know if that would be the case if he'd have been in a different placement. Yeah.
Once he's settled back at college, Giles gives Jane a ring.
Hi, Giles.
They want to know, are you happy at college?
Yeah.
Yeah, you like it, don't you?
Yeah.
You want to show?
But under the current Mental Health Act, there's still a risk that young people like Giles could be sectioned for their autism diagnosis alone. That's what happened to Beth. Beth is diagnosed with autism and pathological demand avoidance. Special educational schools didn't work out for her.
It was a school for autistic children, but not for children with the PDA diagnosis that Beth had. So again, everything was around boundaries and demands. You know, staff would be assaulted by Beth, they would call the police. So yeah, there we were being told that the only thing we could do with Beth to keep her out of the criminal justice system was to place her in hospital.
Giles and Beth's stories highlight how important these decisions around education are. For now, Alfie is happy at his local school.
At the minute, mainstream school is working really well. So he goes to a small village school, and I think that's really great for him. It does worry me when he goes to high school.
Transitions like moving schools can be hard on autistic children's mental health. Michelle mentioned this as a worry for her friend George, whose son Finley is making the move this September.
Finley, what does autism mean to you?
It means you get these struggles and things, and I like the part, definitely, the part where you get special symptoms. Like, I'm really good at art and stuff like that. And
we've always known that Finley's on the spectrum since he was about 2. We didn't want to get him diagnosed, but as he got older, his anxiety got worse each year, especially going into a different class at the beginning of year. Around September would be when he'd be really anxious.
And I think often when you get anxious, it then can make you become really low. So then obviously you've got the anxiety, and depression can then kind of sink in as well.
And I find with Finley's anxiety, his repetitive behaviours come out a lot more once he's anxious. So he'll always stand there like this and say to Mark, "I love you, Dad. I love you, Dad." And he he says to me that he has to get it just right before he can move on. It all comes under the autism spectrum, so you have there's that chart, isn't there, where you have autism in the middle and then all the things around it that kind of link with it. So OCD is one of them, anxiety is one of them,
Demand avoidance is another one, which is definitely what Alfie has.
So just going back to Finley moving up to the next school then, do you have any worries around his autism and his mental health?
I do worry about his mental health as he gets older, and how different changes are going to affect him.
Jo van Herwegen is a psychology professor who studies the effects of these transitions. So do you think the transition between primary and secondary could be detrimental to an autistic pupil's mental health?
Before the students transitioned, we looked at their well-being, and so we measured anxiety and wider well-being. And we found that indeed there is an increase in anxiety and decrease in well-being before and after the transition. But after the transition, the scores didn't come down yet, although students were reporting that they settled in and that they made friends and that they were fine. Again, there was lots of individual differences, so that some had a massive increase in their anxiety after moving to secondary schools, some not, some even decreased.
So does Jo agree with campaigners that autism should be removed from the Act?
Well, I think it's absolutely right that autism is removed from there. I mean, it doesn't mean because you've got a diagnosis of autism that you've got mental health issues. There is sometimes a fine line between thinking what can we do in terms of interventions, which kind of brings it back to we think the autistic person should change, we should support them, but on the other hand we should maybe also think around what can we in society do, or what can we in education do to be a more inclusive environment.
But what does that inclusive environment look like in the classroom?
It is just looking at trying to desensitise the classrooms, the routines, in a way that actually is manageable for those pupils.
And is it hard to make those adjustments?
In an ideal world, it wouldn't be, but the curriculum is so prescriptive. So if you've got somebody who's feeling incredibly overwhelmed by it, they could actually miss a whole chunk of their education without us really realising. We currently have a young lady who actually should be within a specialist school. Now we have the situation where this young lady is actually going to be leaving school with, I would say, a negative experience. We're frantically trying to backtrack, frantically trying to find her options and opportunities, but that comes at a cost, and mainstream school don't have it.
It's a big day out for Alfie today. He's off to the farm with his cousins.
How did you feel about feeding the goats?
I felt happy, anxious at first, but then you helped me, and then I realised that it just felt weird.
Did it? What did it feel like then?
It felt like somebody was licking my hand. Not a goat.
It's a bit tickly, isn't it?
Not a goat at all.
No? Oh, that's a bit strange, isn't it? Oh, so we're having a good time. It's lovely and hot today, isn't it?
I see a bunny. I see a bunny.
We go places and we do things as a family, and we have to kind of prime him, get him ready for the situation.
I was like, I found him there.
Oh, this one's a bit more active. Do you like piglets, guys?
I like it. Except they do stink.
They do a bit.
Every emotion is magnified with him, isn't it? That's the thing. So when he feels really happy, he's like absolutely can't contain it. Like the other day when they were in the paddling pool, and they go absolutely mental, and we know it's going to end in tears because you know he ends up sort of pushing his brother's head under the water and that, because he just gets so overexcited, and then if he's angry, he's really angry. And I guess we sort of tread on eggshells a little bit, don't we? Thinking, is he going to go? Isn't he going to go?
Outside of education, children who experience poor mental health are usually referred to CAMHS.
So when a child is presenting with mental health difficulties, whether it be low self-esteem, anxiety, professionals or even parents can refer them to CAMS. Now, CAMS stands for Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services.
And how might the experience of an autistic individual be different under that service?
It can often be a very overwhelming experience for a child with autism, meeting new people, being in unfamiliar environments. And it is likely that the CAMS clinician will identify these kind of reactions to them, or maybe difficulty with eye contact in their kind of therapeutic work with them. But it will often mean that their sessions with CAMS aren't effective until that point, because they aren't being kind of understood as much as they kind of could be.
In 2016, an inquiry was launched to improve access to healthcare for autistic people. But it's still reported that some children wait over a year for their first appointment with a mental health worker. And once they do get a referral, does the mental health service make enough adjustments for autism?
It's a bit of a lottery game at the moment. Sometimes it's so simple, but it's very difficult for autistic people to access. And then the person just gets lost in the system.
Since 2015, there's actually been a 72% increase in the number of children with learning disabilities held in mental health units. This is how Jeremy describes what happened to Beth, who was sectioned to an assessment treatment unit at 15 years old.
Autism is not a mental health condition. It's a developmental thing.
She spent time in 19 different schools, both mainstream and specialist, before being referred to a mental health hospital. How did she describe her experience when she was there?
The first time I went to see Beth, I will never forget. There is a scene in the film Silence of the Lambs, and that's exactly how it was. I walked down a corridor and there were two other people in seclusion rooms, and they were distressed and upset. And there was my little girl stood behind a perspex window. And that is forever imprinted in my mind. Nobody should live in that way at all.
A report from 2020 found that some people had been held in seclusion for 13 years.
They felt Beth was so dangerous that only if Beth turned blue would they go into the room. There had to be 5 people present for the door to be opened. And they slid her food in and slammed the door. It was like watching a wild animal being fed. So one day an agency staff gave Beth a biro. Not knowing that Beth wasn't allowed biros, Beth took the pen and broke it instantly. And she used the broken plastic to puncture her skin. She then took the inside of the biro and she pushed it all the way into her arm. And it stayed there.
How long was it in her arm for?
That stayed there for 8 weeks. For eight weeks.
I put Jeremy's claims to NHS England and reached out for an interview, but they didn't respond. So it seems that there are 3 main pathways for autistic children with mental health struggles: a mainstream school, a specialist school, and in some cases, a mental health hospital. I've spoken to experts from mental health and educational systems, and all of them are telling me that both systems aren't set up well enough for autism. So what is the solution?
I think we're not built with mentally ill brains. I think that what happens is we're born autistic into a world which isn't autism friendly.
The campaign to remove autism from the Mental Health Act is being spearheaded by Alexis Quinn, along with the National Autistic Society.
I think when you think of the Mental Health Act and that's a law, that's a piece of legislation, which has the power to detain somebody, against their will for indefinitely. I know one man that's been detained for 20 years for no other reason than the fact that he's autistic. When you look at that happening on a societal level, on a government level, that we're equating, that diagnosis with deficit, we've got a problem from the top. And that obviously seeps down to people's perceptions of what autism is. And if people respond, with care and with compassion, like they would any other human being, we can live full, fulfilling lives, in society. I think what's very unhelpful is the way that the system responds. And it responds by breaking those attachments with your family. It responds by, taking you from your home and locking you in an institution which at its core is based on treating something which doesn't need to be treated. And that's not okay.
So in terms of the environment then, do you think finding the right school actually has a big impact on the child's future?
We know there's a link, don't we, between school, a good school experience, and then mental health, and then the ATU system. We know that you're more likely to be at risk if you've had a school exclusion of entering an ATU system. So 100%, what we need is the right environments, but that means that we need the right community support, and we need people to think about us and treat us as though we have different dispositions and that we're not inherently disordered and full of deficit. And when those things happen, then we'll see a reduction in admissions to mental health units.
If autism isn't a mental health disorder, why hasn't it already been removed from the Mental Health Act? Alex Rutkeen chaired the inquiry into the Mental Health Act reform and doesn't think removing autism from the Act is the right thing to do.
I think it would be an actively terrible idea for it to go through.
So why do you believe that removing ASD from the Mental Health Act might actually not be beneficial?
If you shut down the Mental Health Act, you've still got the Mental Capacity Act. And so to be honest, fear is probably the right word to use, is just all the people who they're trying to get out of the Mental Health Act will just be transferred straight across to the Mental Capacity Act, which provides a framework for detention, it provides the ability to treat. If your goal is get these people out of the Mental Health Act, well, you will achieve that, but it's not achieving what I think the people really, really want to do, which is stop the people being detained in hospital. It's just going to, to use a rather kind of naff image, it will just change the name of the lock on the door.
Break the spring to the hill.
But the reality is, many families are unaware of the changes to the Mental Health Act, so can't add their voice to the discussion.
I didn't even know that was a thing, and that, as the dad of an autistic child, that breaks my heart to hear that, to be honest. And to think that he's not going to get support through his life that makes me quite upset, and it makes me quite angry as well,
I'm back to see Alfie and his family for one last time.
For the future, I just want him to understand himself, which he's doing a lot. We talk about his autism all the time, and we say it's a quality. All I want really is for him to be happy and to kind of form his own path in life and be happy in what he's doing.
The people I've met on this journey are all now happy and thriving with the right care.
Beth's future, she has one. She will go on to work, she will go through college, she'll do all the things that we've always known she was capable of.
What I want is for people to have equal rights, to be recognised as a proper human.
But there are more Bethanys still in the system. The latest figures show there are more than 2,000 autistic people in mental health units. And mental health diagnoses among autistic people continue to rise. Meanwhile, Alfie continues his journey through school, navigating those everyday hurdles in his own unique way.
What do you love the most about being autistic then? So this is our last question. What do you love the most about it?
What I love about autism is let's just show them.
Okay.
Look up there. Oh.
So you think this is what you love the most about being autistic, is it? That you've got all these different Lego sets?
If autism is removed from the Act, it could affect the lives of 700,000 people diagnosed with the condition in the UK.